Most of us believe we are good people. We believe our choices come from reason, morality, and careful thinking. When we see others making terrible mistakes, we often think, "I would never do something like that." But Fyodor Dostoevsky spent his life challenging this comforting belief. He discovered that the most frightening part of human nature is not obvious evil. It is our incredible ability to convince ourselves that our selfish desires, harmful choices, and darkest actions are actually logical, necessary, and even good. His novels were not just stories about criminals or troubled people. They were warnings about something hidden inside all of us. This is why Dostoevsky still makes readers uncomfortable more than 150 years later. He did not write about monsters from fairy tales or villains who clearly know they are evil. His characters are often people who look surprisingly similar to us: intelligent, ambitious, emotional, and convinced that their actions make sense. Step by step, they use their intelligence not to discover the truth, but to protect themselves from it. Dostoevsky forces us to face an uncomfortable question. If you were slowly becoming the person you fear the most, would you even notice? Before Dostoevsky could understand the darkness inside others, he first had to encounter the darkness in his own life. As a young man, he believed in great ideas about changing society and improving humanity. But in 1849, everything changed. He was arrested and sentenced to death. Standing before a firing squad, waiting for the final command, he was forced to confront a question most of us spend our lives avoiding. If everything ended today, what would actually matter? In those terrifying moments, success, pride, and ordinary worries suddenly looked very different. But Dostoevsky did not die that day. At the final moment, his sentence was changed. Instead, he was sent to years of hard labor in Siberia. For many people, this would have only been a tragedy. But for Dostoevsky, Siberia became a brutal education about human nature. He lived beside murderers and criminals rejected by society. Yet instead of seeing only evil, he discovered something far more complicated. Even people who had done terrible things still carried moments of kindness, regret, love, and humanity. His experience in Siberia shaped one of Dostoevsky's most important ideas. There is no simple line separating good people from bad people. We like to imagine the world divided into clear categories: the moral and the immoral, the innocent and the guilty. But reality is much more frightening. A kind person can become cruel under the influence of fear, pride, or ambition. Someone who has made terrible mistakes can still contain love and compassion. The real battle between good and evil is not happening between different groups of people. It is happening inside every human heart. One of Dostoevsky's greatest warnings was this: intelligence does not protect us from moral failure. Sometimes it can even make our mistakes more dangerous. Intelligent people can become extremely skilled at creating explanations that defend what they already want to believe. We do not always use reason like a scientist searching for truth. Sometimes we use it like a lawyer inside our own mind, constantly trying to prove that we are innocent, that we are right, and that we do not need to change. This idea became the center of one of Dostoevsky's greatest novels, Crime and Punishment. Raskolnikov is not a mindless killer. What makes him far more frightening is that he is intelligent, educated, and has a theory that explains his actions. He believes that certain extraordinary individuals have the right to step beyond ordinary morality if they serve a greater purpose. But Dostoevsky asks a terrifying question. What happens when a human being starts believing that their intelligence places them above everyone else? After committing his crime, Raskolnikov discovers something his theory could not predict. Humans cannot simply turn off their conscience. He can create hundreds of arguments explaining why he was right, but somewhere inside him, another voice refuses to disappear. Dostoevsky believed that we do not only suffer because society punishes us. Sometimes the greatest punishment comes from being forced to live with ourselves and the truth we try to hide. This is what made Dostoevsky different from many other thinkers. He did not believe humanity's greatest problem was simply a lack of knowledge. If knowing the right answer was enough, life would be easy. But often, we know what we should do, and still choose the opposite. We know we should protect our health, but damage it. We know we should value people we love, but hurt them. The human problem exists somewhere deeper than logic. In Notes from Underground, Dostoevsky created one of the strangest characters in literature, a man who understands his own problems but still refuses to change. He knows he is bitter, lonely, and self-destructive. Yet strangely, he continues holding on to his suffering. Dostoevsky discovered a disturbing paradox. Sometimes humans choose unhappiness not because they do not understand what is better, but because even suffering can give them a feeling of control. This warning feels especially relevant in the modern world. We live in an age with more information than any period in history. We have books, science, the internet, and artificial intelligence. But more powerful tools do not automatically create wiser human beings. Dostoevsky reminds us that external progress does not mean we have solved our internal conflicts. We may upgrade our technology while carrying the same fears, desires, and weaknesses that humans have always carried. In The Idiot, Dostoevsky tried a different experiment. Instead of asking why people become evil, he asked, what would happen if a truly good person entered the real world? He created a character full of kindness, honesty, and compassion. But instead of being celebrated, this innocence makes him seem out of place. Dostoevsky asks a painful question. Can pure goodness survive in a world shaped by power, status, and ambition? Dostoevsky was not a pessimist who believed humans were completely evil. In fact, what makes his work powerful is that he saw both sides at the same time. He understood humanity's capacity for cruelty, but he also believed in transformation. For him, hope does not come from pretending darkness does not exist. Real hope begins when we become brave enough to look directly at it. In his final and greatest novel, The Brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky explored the deepest questions of human existence. If the world contains suffering, injustice, and loss, how can we still believe life has meaning? If humans have freedom, why do they often choose things that destroy themselves? These are not just philosophical questions. They are questions every person eventually faces in their own life. Dostoevsky's answer was not a perfect system or a simple formula for happiness. He believed that what saves humanity exists in smaller things: the ability to love, forgive, take responsibility, and see the human being behind another person's mistakes. Perhaps the reason Dostoevsky remains powerful today is that he was never only writing about 19th century Russia. He was writing about invisible battles every human experiences, between reason and emotion, selfishness and love, despair and hope. Every time we create excuses for something we know is wrong, every time our pride prevents us from apologizing, every time we care more about winning than finding the truth, we meet Dostoevsky's characters inside ourselves. Dostoevsky does not give us comfortable answers. He does something much harder. He gives us a mirror. And inside that mirror, we can see both the most beautiful and most frightening parts of ourselves. Maybe the goal of life is not to become a perfect person who never makes mistakes. Maybe what matters more is having enough honesty to recognize our contradictions and continue trying to become better. More than a century later, Dostoevsky's warning remains. Be careful of the darkness inside you, especially when it speaks with the voice of reason and convinces you that everything it does is right.